Good morning. It is Wednesday, February 12th. Glad to be here with all of you. Folks remember from when the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate came in. We have developed a lot of really fantastic tax programs here in Vermont for low-income Vermonters, right? We have the tax adjustment and tax credit for property taxes. We have the child tax credit. We have the earned income tax credit. And none of those work at all if folks aren't filing or aren't filing accurately. And so we have the two main programs with us today to talk about their volunteer tax assistance programs. And starting with Liz Scharf, if you want to join us. And just as folks are listening to the testimony, I'd love if we would give some thought also to sort of how we can support the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate to be collaborating as effectively as possible, and the tax department in general to be collaborating as effectively as possible with these two great community partners. Floor is yours, Liz.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Liz Scharf. I am the Director of Community Economic Development and Food Security at Capstone Community Action. And I just need to, I'm a resident of Middlesex. So I just need to share my screen.
Success.
Everyone can see it? Great.
Thank you.
So I'm here today to talk about our VITA program, which stands for the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. And I found some glasses in my,
Good.
stored away, my little secret stash of glasses. Okay. So just as a refresher, the Community Action Network is all over the state of Vermont, serving all of the counties. So we have Brock Community Action. We have Capstone, which serves Central Vermont, Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, which is the Chittenden, Addison, Franklin, Grand Isle counties. Northeast Kingdom Community Action, Orleans, Essex, and Caledonia, and then the Southeastern Vermont Community Action, the Windsor and Wyndham counties.
Josh Davis's 50th birthday today.
Sorry?
It's Josh Davis's 50th birthday today, and you have
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow. Yes, he's relatively new. I've been there a year or so. Yep. Sorry?
By Vermont standards. By Vermont standards.
Okay. And we received, just so you understand, a lot of our funding comes from the Office of Economic Opportunity through Health and Human Services. The VITA grant actually comes through the Treasurer's Office. So we receive funding from just sort of multiple sources, but a lot of our funding comes from OEO. So I'm here to talk about VITA, but we are, as a network, seeking to increase or seeking $1.65 million in base funding for our micro business development program, our VITA tax program, and our financial coaching program. Our VITA program in particular, we're looking for an increase of $148,000 over the $400,000 base funding. And all three of these programs we call financial capabilities programs. We do a lot of work with small businesses and entrepreneurs. So we do workshops and one-on-one training. We do a lot of work with them. We have workshops on taxes and what it means to be a self-employed person. We refer our micro business folks that we're working with to our tax program. So we do a lot of Schedule Cs for folks that we're also coaching. We also do financial coaching, and we have a network of accredited financial counselors. Many of those counselors also are certified to be VITA tax volunteers, because it's really important if you're doing financial counseling to also understand someone's tax implication, what kinds of credits or rebates they may be, or tax incentives they may be eligible for. So the three programs really work well together. Today, I am focused to talk about our VITA tax program. So for our program, we are funded through the Treasurer's Office, as well as we get a small grant from the IRS. And we are able to help folks prepare and file their taxes for free if they earn $67,000 or less. And that is no matter what your family size. You can be a single person or you can be a family of 6, and the income limit is 67. Occasionally, someone will come to us and their income will be 75, and we just realize that halfway through doing their taxes and we don't turn them away. But in general, we're looking at, I would say, the vast majority of the people that we do taxes for are quite low income folks. Many who are coming to us to do, basically, it may be their homestead or their renter's credit. Or just, their regular W-2s or small businesses.
How you came to the 67?
It's not us, it's an IRS, and it changes every year. So the VITA program, it used to be like 64, then it went to 65, and so right now it's 67. So it is, we are subject to their rules. Yeah. But again, like I said, it's not set in stone, but that's the guideline.
Totally get that.
Yep.
What is it pegged? Like, what is determining whether it's 67? Is it an arbitrary decision, or is it pegged to median income or
It's
average income?
It's really what we'll look at is their adjusted gross income.
Okay.
And again, if someone comes to us and says, I've got $100,000, we'll turn them away. But if they're like a little over, we're not turning them away. We're just doing their taxes.
I think just to give context, I think the reason we're asking is we're looking at income brackets,
Oh.
other programs, and we're just trying to figure out why.
This
the
is
67
totally, yes, this is not, and this isn't a good program to look at income guidelines, I would have to say, because most, as you know, a lot of programs are based on like federal poverty level or what is the area median income, right? 200% above, those kinds of things. This is you can't tie it to any of those. But I will say that most people are far below the 67,000, so. And last year in 2024, we were able to help Vermonters get $4,741,000 in tax refunds. And that included $2,600,000 in tax credits. So those are things like the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, and probably some small education credits and things like that. So our request is a little bit of an increase. So I kind of want to back up a little bit to say how this evolved. We now offer in all 5 agencies a full year-round tax program. So that differs from other free tax programs that are specifically during February to April, and then they shut down. So we have that where we have volunteers. We had over 100 volunteers this year statewide, and they work during the February to April. But then we also have one full-time equivalent tax program coordinator who is working throughout the year. And what that tax program coordinator does is, starting in October, they start recruiting volunteers. They start doing their own trainings because they have to do federal IRS trainings as well as state trainings. In January, we are training all the volunteers, and then in February, we start.
Can you tell me more about the training of the volunteers? I thought about signing up for one.
Oh, you should.
There's no way, but okay.
You can.
You don't have time. It seems like I think it would be a really interesting way to learn how all this works.
Yes, well, it is. And it's actually, I look at it as a great, like, I try to encourage people, it's like a good resume builder, right? Like, how to do taxes. So there is there's a program, we use TaxSlayer, and there's an exam that you take, and you can either be a basic tax preparer or an advanced tax preparer. And so what you have to do is go through, and I'm sure your people have to do this too, Colin. You answer a bunch of questions. Some require the computer, some don't. You get a book that kind of helps you figure out what the answers are. But they actually make you go through and run through people's tax scenarios. And they're often they're really these ridiculous scenarios where you don't actually see them in real life, but it may be, a situation where they're trying to catch you on something. So we take those tests, and if you get an 80% or higher, you are able to be a tax preparer for that year. And then you do it again. So I've been a tax preparer, like I've done it as a volunteer, like on the weekends. I've done it for 10 years. And so for me, taking the test is pretty simple, but I still have to go in and do it, right? And I still have to be like, why is it that answer? So there's a whole process.
And so to like using a plug and play sort of training program like Tax Slayer, I'm really glad it's called that. How does that incorporate sort of Vermont specific information and changes? How do you all adapt to that?
So we receive training. So our program coordinator receives training from the state about any kind of changes that are happening in Vermont. She then or he then will train the volunteers, have a Vermont training hour or two, right? And say, these are some of the things that we're going to see. Tax Slayer updates all that. So for whatever state it has their specific tax rules, Tax Slayer goes in and adjusts for Vermont. So when you're doing the tax return, those credits and things will show up. Am I answering that?
Not quite. I feel like we're passing new laws every year, whether we should or not. And I often hear from constituents who are still using their tax preparers from another state.
Yeah.
And the sort of local context is often lost. And in thinking about the job of the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate, I'm trying to figure out how we can sort of do a better job making sure that Vermonters are learning about Vermont specific taxes.
Yeah.
And so like, I understand that like the forms are usually with any sort of national software, the forms are great and they're usually updated. But some of the nuance that a human could catch is sometimes lost. And I just want to make sure that we're collaborating as much between sort of folks in the field, like you all and the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate and the Communications Department of Tax to make sure that folks are really understanding.
Yeah. So in terms of things like, for example, the child tax credit that Vermont has, the $1,000 credit for the 5 and under, and you don't have to have an income, right? That was something that we really had to do a lot of education around. And so we have the program of Head Start, which has a lot of folks in that who sort of fall into that category of not necessarily qualifying for the federal child tax credit because they don't have earned income. And so educating them to say, you need to do your taxes. You have a baby, right? Like you're going to get $1,000, or you've got 2 kids, you're going to get $2,000. So it really is outreach that we do. And, with your organization as well, we try to really get out there and make sure people understand on things like our social media, like it's time to do taxes.
And does your community action do that on your own, or is that sort of coordinated messaging across all the community actions?
It would be on our own. We're not as sophisticated to do coordinated messaging. I have to be honest about that. We all have our own sort of marketing groups and social medias and that.
Okay.
We
That
could.
might be a role that the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate could do, would be sort of deliver to you centralized messaging.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And and we will take messages that are already made and post them. It's not like we're coming up on our own, but so really like the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. I think one of the struggles that we have as a organization, and AARP may also see this. They have a little bit of it, and Colin will talk about it. They have a little bit of a slightly different constituency. But is that a lot of the families that are eligible for the child tax credit will go to a paid provider because they can get an advance. And, you know, if the last I learned was that like if the advance was under $1,000, it was like a 0% loan, right? On the off chance that they actually submit the taxes and find out, oh, somebody else claimed this kid, right? So you don't actually get this money. And so that's always been a struggle for us, is to try to catch those families before they go to a paid provider, but they don't want to wait. They don't want to wait the couple weeks that it takes for us to do the taxes, because we're doing hundreds of taxes, like right this very moment, right? And a preparer may hold on to it for 2 weeks while they're doing everybody else's, and then, you know, they will submit it, and it might be a month before they get their refund. And so they don't want to wait for that refund. And so that's just something that we struggle with. To get the loan, people not have to pay $200 or $400. That's just being taken out of their refund, but not necessarily being that they're not really clear that that's what's happening, and that they're getting a loan as well. And that interest is being taken out of that if it's over $1,000. So.
Yeah, just so folks that maybe are audited or have other issues, do you help them through that process as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, so that goes back to why we have a full-time person throughout the year. So we definitely have people coming to us all year round with issues that they are encountering. It might be a letter from the IRS that they don't understand, and we're trying to help them figure that out. It may be that they may have forgotten to file. Like, we get a lot of people who are like, I haven't filed in 4 years, right? Because they've been scared or something, right? And so, you know, we're literally helping people file past taxes as far back as our software will allow us to do it, which is like three years plus the current year. So 4 years really we can do. And, you know, there's just mistakes that happen, right? And people come to us, and we work with the taxpayer advocate. We definitely partner with them when we have to. I will tell a quick story of, I know there's a bill out there for, I don't know if you call it a bill, but for, having folks who have had fraud happen, and they're, you know, they have to take their, you know, they take their money out of their retirement, and then they have a $40,000 bill to the IRS because they took it all out, you know, and gave it to some person. So we actually were working with someone recently, just in the last month, along with the taxpayer advocate. We had to do their taxes for them so that the taxpayer advocate could have the information and try to work with how they were going to deal with this $40,000 bill. Yeah.
How many of those cases do you typically see?
We don't see cases like that very often. I mean, so I'm also a financial counselor. I have definitely seen people who have had, who are victims of financial fraud, and worked with them to figure out how to deal with it, right? And depending on the amount, you know, I had someone that I worked with who had $30,000 in credit card because it was a love interest, right? And they just thought they were doing the right thing, and they ended up paying it back on their own, right? It didn't require bankruptcy. It didn't require them to, you know, go into huge amounts of debt, but like those things happen. And as part of our financial counseling, and capability program, we do workshops on financial fraud. So we do a lot of partnering with like local banks to teach classes on financial fraud, because there's so much happening and it changes so quickly. So that's sort of the beauty of our programs. They kind of meld together. And so, yeah, so that full-time person will be helping people throughout the year on all kinds of things. That we're not idle, I will have to say, throughout the year.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so these are just some numbers. This was in our last year, so the tax year of 2024. For the statewide network, we had 118 volunteers. We filed a little over 5,000 tax returns. 1,067 had earned income tax credits, averaging $1,112 per tax return. 502 returns with child tax credit, averaging $1,400. And then we also did 454 small businesses. Then there's this little quote, this lady found out about us recently and she was so excited. She didn't realize that there was a free program. And, you know, that's the thing. A lot of people are like, they have pretty simple, right? They might have a social security and a pension, right? Those aren't challenging things to do, and a homestead. And they, you know, people are afraid, you know, they're afraid of taxes, are afraid to do it on their own. And they come to the community action agencies and places like AARP because they're trusted, right? Like they use us for other resources. And that's also sort of one of the nice things about the VITA tax program within the Community Action Network is that we do offer other services. So we can make referrals to people who, you know, if they find out that they have a, you know, giant IRS tax bill, we can send them to a financial counselor to help them figure out, you know, if they can, how they can make payments on that. Or again, if they're, you know, a small business, we can refer them to our micro business if we're seeing that they really are, maybe need some help and assistance with, you know, keeping their finances in order. We make referrals to our micro business. And then of course there's like weatherization and all those kinds of things as well, heating assistance, food shelf, all of those things that we offer at the community action agencies. And then Colin and I met a few days ago just to kind of align with the fact that we were both visiting here together. While we don't like officially have like a partnership, we definitely refer each other, like refer people to each other if something may be out of scope for us. So there are certain taxes like we can't do that AARP may be able to do. Things like here's a kind of crazy one. I would do it, but apparently we're not supposed to, like the car tax, the electric car tax, right? Are you able to do the electric car tax? So he's checking his.
Sure.
They're considered out of scope, right? And so even though, you know, so those are places.
A rebate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the 7,500 rebate, yeah. And, you know, during the flood, for example, AARP used our spaces, we shared spaces for doing taxes down in the Rutland area. And you'll see that it's quite different. So with the community in terms of, so AARP has a lot of sites that might do fewer taxes. You know, like the local library who might do 65 taxes or 100 taxes. And they have sites scattered throughout Vermont. So they have about twice as many volunteers. And they do a couple thousand more returns than we do, similar around the small businesses. And you'll notice how the tax refunds, they have about less than $1 million, like 400,000 more in tax refunds, despite having done more returns, but that's because they're dealing with older people who don't get refunds, right? So it's not an indication. So that really shows you, visualizes that we're doing more returns for like lower income people who may get tax credits and working families, and they're doing maybe more work with some of the older folks. And we complement each other in that regard. And there's frankly not enough of us. Like we could use more volunteers if you have any interest.
So I'm so curious, I don't even know how you'd find this out, but do you have data on uptake in the populations that have contact with you versus the eligible populations that don't have contact with you? I'm just wondering how saturated you are, or how many people may not be accessing.
Oh, there's a lot of people not accessing this, I think. And I think it's, well, so if you look at it, you know, we're talking 12,000 tax returns. These aren't people, these are returns, right? And there are other people who aren't, right? And again, some of that goes back to trust of like, or just this belief that I have to go to a paid provider. Some people do it on their own. A lot of people do it on their own, right? Like I do my own taxes on a different software system, right? But like, here's an example. There's this older woman that I have worked with for years, and she out of the blue called me yesterday. she is the perfect candidate for a volunteer income tax assistance program. Yet she just really believes that she has this tax preparer and she wants to stick with this person. And that's fine, right?
Yeah.
But she's paying $400 for nothing. I mean, it's such an easy tax return that she could get done for free. So I think there's a bit of that. And I don't want to knock tax preparer. I mean, people, that's their job, right? I don't want to say don't go to a tax preparer. But I don't think the vast majority understand how simplified it can be to do your own taxes or to have someone do your taxes for you when you qualify for something like our VITA tax program.
I would just like to say there are many qualified professional tax preparers in the state of Vermont, some of whom own businesses all over the state. And they do a great deal of good for
Oh, yeah.
people of higher income levels who have a lot of, assets to come into compliance with state and federal law. The people I believe that you serve, which separates the professional taxpayer preparer from the group that you service that you deal with, I think is income.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
These, the people that you work with, I know that professional tax preparers sometimes refer people to you and to AARP. It's really important. So I hope that there can be some understanding, some respect for both. And I mean, professionals aren't just in it for the money.
Right.
It's a rewarding profession
Exactly.
that they
Yes.
try to do good for society by helping that population come into compliance with law. And
Mhm.
I guess I'll stop there, but I just think it's really important to be positive, to work together and do the best we can for Vermonters of all income levels.
No, I agree with that. And in fact, we do, when there are, we have a list of people that we can refer people to when they're out of scope, for example, right? Because there's a lot, I mean, there are people who do come to us who either used to come to us and then they've sort of gotten out of income, or they're a business owner who, who is doing more than we can manage with the Schedule C. And so we have professionals that we refer people to that if they
Make sure
don't
that
meet
list
us.
is complete. There are a lot of professionals.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yeah. And that, I mean, it's totally true. Yes. And I mean, I think that we are working with a fraction of the people who don't necessarily need a professional person to do their taxes. So.
Representative Bodie?
Thank you. So I was thinking, you're looking for volunteers. I wondered if you could go to high schools and it would be a combination of teaching kids about taxes and finding volunteers there.
So we do have, I know that the Rutland office partners with the schools, with Castleton, I think it is. So we do have folks, we did for a while, my agency worked with Norwich. You need to have someone who's willing in the school to be able to help out. And Burlington uses Champlain College, so they use a lot of students from Champlain. High schools, I'm not sure if you have to be 18 to be a volunteer. I don't know, I'd have to check. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good idea. And I think really where we could use more volunteers is like the Northeast Kingdom. That's a challenging place to find volunteers. And I think the Northeast Kingdom also is challenging because of its geography, right? It's got lots of pockets, and so for travel, you have to have more sites so that people are able to get to a tax preparer.
Back to you.
So just finally, there are some, this had come up in another question from another committee about just our language supports for non-English speakers and hearing impaired people. So CVOEO tends to have the largest population. Brock also is seeing more down in the Rutland area. And so CVOEO has this list of programs that they work with to support non-English speakers. And then there's sort of these perhaps ad hoc groups, like we have a group that we've worked with in a couple of years as necessary with the Afghan community in Montpelier. And that's just a local volunteer who reaches out to us, sets up a day, brings a translator, and we do their taxes for them. And then there's also over the phone interpreter through the IRS that's free to use. So we do have those resources available for folks who might find it difficult to do their taxes. And that is the end of my slideshow.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Not a question, just a comment that I've used this service in the past in Barry and it's wonderful. And I actually know Sandra, who you have the. And she was in fact very, very grateful.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yes.
Okay.
She
Yay.
didn't get her stop sign, but she got her taxes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
That's one question before you go. Yeah, do you also work with adults with cognitive disabilities?
On taxes? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
I have one more question, sorry.
What are you doing?
How did you draw, how were the lines drawn for the,
Don't ask me that because just yesterday I was like, what towns do we serve in Addison County? Like, we have this, Blackstone serves 3 counties, but then we've got like 2 towns in Addison and
Yeah.
1 in Windsor. And I don't know. I think it's actually about proximity. I think it's about travel and like what makes the most sense. Travel-wise.
we've seen other similar looking maps in our committees.
But a little
Well, the
different.
weatherization
Different.
too, it's also like, I think with the weatherization traveling around, it's there, I think that part of it was built around something like that too, because they have to travel to people's houses. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Colin. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this committee has heard from your predecessor at AARP, so very glad to have you here. Welcome to Ways and Means.
Thank you. For the record, Colin Hilliard from AARP Vermont. I'm the advocacy director there. Thank you, Chair Kornheiser and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to you all. As folks know from my predecessor, AARP is a nonpartisan social mission organization with an age 50+ membership, nearly 38 million nationwide, and over 100,000 members here in Vermont. We support livable communities for all ages, aging in place initiatives, and financial opportunity and resiliency for everyone as they work, age, and retire. The AARP Foundation Tax Aid Program is a separate charitable organization from AARP's state office work and our advocacy work. They have a paid staff in office in Washington, D.C., and then is largely volunteer run across the country. It was started in 1968. It's the nation's largest free volunteer-based tax assistance and preparation program. It served 80 million people over its history. Last year, 28,000 volunteers served 1.7 million taxpayers nationally. 965,000 of those were adults over 50 with low income. Here in Vermont last year, 214 volunteers served 7,100 folks in 65 locations across the state. Refunds totaled just over $5 million. It's a program offered in conjunction with the IRS. Membership in AARP is not required. We specialize and focus on folks 50+ of lower and moderate income, but not going to turn someone away as long as they qualify with the specifics of what kinds of returns we can prepare. Modest refunds make a really big impact on this population. It puts money back into their pockets to make sure that they don't miss out on credits and deductions. And Vermont Tax Aid's program, the Vermont Tax Aid Program has the distinction of being one of the most accurate of AARPs in the country based on rejection rates from the IRS. Very similar to VITA's program, there's IRS training and certification every year. There is a Vermont specific training for 2 days, 6 hours a day, that will probably be happening in the next, I think, week or so here for our new cohort of volunteers. And yeah, the program has been really successful because of the strong relationships we have with community partners, like churches, libraries, senior centers around the state, are where many of the locations are. And we also, work hard to have those locations with considerations to folks without internet, folks that have trouble with transportation, because that's a really important thing for the demographic that this serves. And lastly, I'll just, before I take any questions you have, mention, I think one of the coolest things about this program to me that as I've learned, being new at ARP and talking to our volunteers is the fulfillment that they get from this work. A lot of times, the clients that they're serving, that hour and a half meeting can be really important social interaction for them, maybe over the course of a month, having someone sit down with them, take that time and walk through that for an older Vermonter that, that it can be a really valuable experience. And so having 65 locations across the state and being able to have those interactions with 7,000 just over 7,000 people a year is something that our volunteers are really proud of. Yeah, that's it. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Colin. Go ahead.
I have a question, and I probably should have asked Liz this as well. How is the scope drawn for what you will or will not do? Is it based on, the training? Is it based on the software? Like, where are the lines drawn for what you'll do and not do?
I believe it's largely based on the training from the IRS and that program. There is, and in the memo that I sent you all has a link to the foundation's website. And there's a page that we can prepare returns with this very long list of different forms and things that we can't. Moving expenses is one thing that we can't do. Farm income or expenses is something we can't do. It's more around the training and nuances in kind of very particular forms and that sort of stuff.
Sorry, go ahead.
How is your program financed?
A portion is from the IRS. There's also the ARP Foundation receives funding from a variety of sources. So I couldn't say here today, like what portion of which comes to Vermont. But I'd be happy to check with our folks.
But it's basically financing that comes from AARP, the local group. And
portion is ARP to the ARP Foundation. A portion is IRS. There's also philanthropic funding to the ARP Foundation.
So curious about the same question that I asked Liz. How do your folks get training and information about Vermont specific taxes?
So I know that we do have a 2-day training each year that is Vermont specific, which is separate from the 3-day training, general IRS training that they get. They also they get a Chromebook to do the virtual trainings on. There are those, in total 5 days of in-person training, I believe. I don't know the specifics of how that is updated, how they receive that new information each year. I'd be happy to get back to you on that.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
We just really want to make sure that the Vermont specific credits are part of sort of how you're communicating out to your constituents. And that we're maximizing the state's ability to sort of do that with you.
Absolutely.
So I should have asked this question to the previous lady. I'll try and catch her out in the hall at some point, but what can we do to help you? Anything? What can we do?
Volunteers are, I think, the biggest capacity for us, especially in the Northeast Kingdom as well. We work. The state office works very closely with volunteers on, communication and getting the message out there. I'd say, just amplifying that message that these services are available. And also, if you're a folk that is a person that has worked in finance, accounting, or really, we also accept volunteers, and volunteers work on this program that don't have any financial background. There's administrative and kind of managerial work that is also done. There's 5, I believe, regional leads, and then we have a volunteer state manager as well. So there's lots of volunteer opportunities within this program at ARP. And so I would say that is our biggest capacity limit is the volunteers.
One of these paragraphs in your letter summarize that we could put out on our Facebook page.
I would be happy to send you all a note, with absolutely.
Shorter, not long.
Yeah.
Just something to
Yep.
summarize.
We definitely have that. I believe there's a blog post on our state ARP state website right now, and I would be happy to pass that along. Thank you.
Great.
Absolutely.
I've seen it on my local front porch forum.
Yes.
We do, yeah. Volunteers often will post in their front porch forums about both the opportunity to utilize the program and to join us.
And I think Representative Holcomb asked of our previous presenter as well, do you have a sense of the sort of percentage of available, like likely participants you have that are into your services?
Don't. I will say one thing is we're at 92% of pre-COVID capacity. A lot of the population that we serve in person is really important for this type of work, and so we definitely lost some momentum there. It would be hard for me to say, especially because while focused on low income 65 plus, we do serve a lot of different folks. So I don't. I'll see. I'll ask if we can get some more information on that.
Thank you.
Yes, Colin, so I think, do you also have an income limitation under which you won't serve somebody, or is it mostly just the capacity of the tax forms and volunteers?
My understanding is it's more about we can prepare returns with that include certain types of returns, and we can't do other types of returns that are more indicative of a higher income person.
Okay.
We do serve moderate income older folks.
Yeah.
And the program is definitely designed for low and moderate income older folks, but if they come in and you look at their documents, and we're not going to turn someone away.
Okay, so the Community Action Partnership may kick somebody over to you if they're 65, but they're making $80,000.
And vice versa too. If there's a business that our two programs are not in competition in any way. We need more, not less. And there's definitely a partnership there, especially in Rutland, during of sharing an office at times, and lots of ways that the two groups work together.
Right. Last question is, I didn't know ARP was offering the service. I knew about VITA through the action agencies, but is there anybody else offering this service that's free to folks in the state?
In Vermont, not to my knowledge. I know New York has some different free programs. I believe some other states do, but in Vermont, these are the only two that I'm aware of and that I know that ARP works with. But that's not to say that there could be. I've heard that some churches will do their own kind of very, very small scale in one community, but statewide these are the only two.
And the feds rolled out a pilot program that was sort of integrated with states, and Vermont did not opt into that sort of part of the pilot round because we were potentially sort of too small to pay for the technology on the first round, which might be a familiar problem. Anything else you want to let us know, Colin?
No, thank you all for your time. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, we would love to, if you have thoughts about how the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate or the tax department could better assist you in communicating with your constituencies, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, we have a break until 10.